In 2006, SpaceX's Falcon 1 rocket launched for the first time from Omelek Island in the South Pacific. This was just 4 years after the company's founding by Elon Musk. Unfortunately, this first rocket crashed 59 seconds after launch. Though, when we fast forward to 2020, SpaceX is now transporting astronauts to the International Space Station. The Starlink satellite constellation is being assembled in orbit. Talks of the first Mars mission coming in the 2024 to 2026 timeframe, and a rideshare program for private industry payloads aboard SpaceX rockets has been made available. That's just one company, and one well-known billionaire. We can also see Virgin Galactic in its final test phases before it begins to give paying customers the astronaut experience, the long-developed project of Richard Branson, as well as the more secretive Blue Origin, founded by Jeff Bezos, which is handling private and corporate payloads, space tourism, and missions to the moon, with its rival SpaceX also competing in these areas. Any way that you slice it, the future of economic opportunity in space is massive. It also appears that the technology and costs has gotten to a point that many ventures only once speculated about can now actually come to fruition. In this video, I want to take a closer look at 3 companies, SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic, and how they each factor into the economic development of space and what the coming years may hold. The economic impact of business in both low Earth orbit and further out in space is expected to be huge in the coming decades. As author Robert Jacobson writes in his book, Space is Open for Business, quote, Morgan Stanley published a report titled Investment Implications of the Final Frontier, which proposed that the space sector will grow into a $1.1 trillion industry by 2040, a sentiment echoed by Goldman Sachs, and both United Launch Alliance and Bank of America Merrill Lynch envision a $2.7 trillion space economy by 2045. End quote. To put that in perspective, the industry currently does about $350 billion in revenue. So while the spread between estimates is fairly large, they are both multiples of what is taking place in the here and now. When turning to the specific financial side of things, I am going to have to mostly focus on Virgin Galactic, as they are the only current publicly traded company of the 3. Let's first see how Virgin Galactic describes what their business is in their annual report. We are a vertically integrated aerospace company pioneering human spaceflight for private individuals and researchers, as well as manufacturer of advanced air and space vehicles. They continue, we are developing a spaceflight program designed to offer customers a unique, multi-day transformative experience. This culminates in a spaceflight that includes views of Earth from space and several minutes of weightlessness, end quote. The multi-day training and flight takes place at and departs from their Spaceport America facility in New Mexico. Virgin is well known for having more than 600 reservations already in place and deposits which are worth $80 million for their future spaceflight services, plus $120 million in future revenue when the full ticket price is paid. At this stage in the game, the company is obviously going after high net worth individuals who want to take a ride into space. They have sold tickets for $250,000 and expect for a time that the price will increase before falling dramatically as the business progresses. As of now, Virgin Galactic notes that 90% of their reservations are from people with net worths of at least $1 million. However, the company also believes that they are well positioned to expand their reach into the future and potentially other space-focused business opportunities. As they know in their annual report, quote, according to a December 2019 article from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the commercial space market is expected to grow 6% per year, from $385 billion in 2017 to at least $1.5 trillion by 2040, reaching 5% of U.S. gross domestic product, end quote. Virgin Galactic intends to do this by further perfecting its reusable launch platform, which currently consists of White Knight 2 and SpaceshipTwo. White Knight carries SpaceshipTwo up to around 45,000 feet, from which the rocket-powered winged vehicle will then take paying astronauts into space. Each launch will consist of 2 pilots and as many as 6 astronauts. Hopefully, the reusable nature of these crafts will dramatically lower costs over time and allow for quick turnarounds in between launches. Also helping will be the planned expansion of the SpaceShip2 fleet to 5 crafts by 2023. The first spaceflight using SpaceShip2 was done in December 2018 by the VSS Unity. Since then, the testing of the crafts in the process has continued. During the production of this video, Virgin Galactic did 2 more test flights. After these, it was scheduled that these would be the last tests before Richard Branson took his flight into space. The first one was successful. The second one, while returning safely, didn't reach space, which according to the company, quote, the rocket motor did not fire due to the ignition sequence not completing. As of now, the company has plans for 2 more test flights to make certain they get it right. Then will come the ramp up as stated in their Q3 2020 earnings call. Quote, "We are embarking on a multi-year effort that will lead to flying not once a month or even once a week. The target's flying 400 flights per year per spaceport. The approach we are taking suggests we could generate meaningful revenues of $1 billion a year per spaceport." End quote. Beyond what they're trying to accomplish with these shorter experiences for customers into space, Virgin Galactic sees potential for further growth. Quote, "We expect to explore the application of our proprietary technologies and our capabilities in areas such as design, engineering, composites manufacturing, high-speed propulsion, and production for other commercial and government uses. Among other opportunities, we believe our technology could be used to develop supersonic and hypersonic vehicles that drastically reduce travel time for point-to-point international travel." End quote. Even further, there is also business in research and experimentation, particularly in low Earth orbit. Right now, it's still extremely expensive and out of reach for smaller firms or research teams. However, with a further decade or so of development, the price could fall to make it quite feasible for a customer standpoint and lucrative for Virgin Galactic. It still is a bit odd to go through the financial numbers and listen to the earnings call of a company like this, as there isn't currently the same volume of information you'd get from a Fortune 500 company, for example. You do get to hear about the interior design of the spaceship though. In Q2, they lost $63 million, while the third quarter saw a loss of $77 million. That's to be expected when no new revenue comes in during most quarters or very little in others. Q4 2020 will see a small booking of revenue because they will be carrying payload on some flights. The good news is that the company has $742 million of cash and cash equivalents on its balance sheet. This after netting $440 million in proceeds from its latest stock offering. So they have plenty of time to work out what they need to and get the business rolling. As for the other two companies, SpaceX and Blue Origin, it can be tougher to pin down exactly what their financial status is in terms of revenues and profit. Author Christian Davenport writes in his book, The Space Barons, Bezos joked that Blue Origin's business model has been, "I sell about $1 billion a year in Amazon stock and I use it to invest in Blue Origin." End quote. There have been reports that Blue Origin actually does make money on its flights, however. Obviously, some deals are publicly funded contracts, which give broad strokes about operations. Also, we know that both are well funded, seeing as Bezos and Musk now both have the means to fund things in addition to what is already gained from private funding. For instance, the book Space is Open for Business notes, quote, "SpaceX boasts 27 investors and approximately $3.3 billion in total funding over 25 rounds. A Series K financing round in May 2019 brought in $535 million from GigaFund, Quantum Global Partners, and Founders X Ventures, followed by another round in June from the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan for an estimated $314.2 million." End quote. Previously, SpaceX did a $350 million raise back in 2017. With everything that I can see from these disclosures and launch contracts, the financial situation is doing more than fine. Jacobson also mentioned in his book that Morgan Stanley put out a report on the valuation of SpaceX in 2019. Estimating its overall value to be between $52 and $120 billion. More recently, the firm's base case has now jumped to $100+ billion, and the bull case is valued at over $200 billion. This is quite an impressive valuation, as Fidelity in 2015 put their estimate at $12 billion. Most of the increase in recent valuation seems to be thanks to Starlink. Starlink is now valued at $80.9 billion. Rockets are worth over $11 billion, and space travel at a potential $9 billion. As Morgan Stanley notes, Morgan Stanley estimates that satellite broadband will represent 50% of the global space economy by 2040, and as much as 70% in the most bullish scenario. Launching satellites that offer broadband internet service will help to drive down the cost of data, just as demand for that data explodes. End quote. Starlink is SpaceX's answer for that. It's a business of providing satellite internet access by using a constellation of small satellites in low Earth orbit. These satellites will number in the thousands when fully deployed, with hundreds already having been launched, of which Musk once said that SpaceX could build the satellites faster than they could reasonably launch into orbit. So, beyond being a transporter for government agencies, SpaceX also looks to be in the business of providing internet via Starlink, launching larger commercial satellites, providing a low-cost ride-sharing program for those to experiment in orbit or small sats, and human spaceflight. Ride-sharing has its own booking tool on the SpaceX website, with a starting price of $1 million to launch 200 kilograms on a SpaceX mission. The human spaceflight part is a common overlap between Virgin Galactic, SpaceX, and Blue Origin, with SpaceX currently promoting on its website private trips into orbit around both Earth and the Moon. Though the astronaut tourism aspect appears to be much more of a focus for Virgin, and Blue Origin than SpaceX. While the rideshare/small satellite business is more competitive between SpaceX and companies like Spire and Planet, already quite a lucrative market. As Jacobson writes, quote, 45% of all launches included small sats in 2019. Add to that, the cost of launching and producing satellites themselves has come down, and according to Morgan Stanley, will come down further. As brought up in Space is Open for Business, quote, satellite launch costs have dropped from $200 million each to $60 million. Morgan Stanley predicts that they could decrease to just $5 million per launch. The firm also expects satellite production costs could decrease by a factor of 1,000 from the current price of $500 million per satellite down to a mere $500,000. End quote. SpaceX is fully engaged bringing down these costs, especially if the Starship program fulfills its promises. Currently, the Falcon 9 cost around $62 million for a new rocket launch and about $50 for a reused rocket. The Falcon Heavy, it comes in at about $90 million. When talking prices for Starship, Elon Musk said in 2019, quote, if you consider operational costs, maybe it will be like $2 million, end quote. If that's the case, and both the Starship upper portion and super heavy rocket boosters are indeed reusable, it could be a massive change in the business of space and the path forward for SpaceX. Reliable, reusable, and low cost for a rocket with this size and power would open up so many opportunities in terms of business and the human exploration side of the equation. Blue Origin has stayed quiet about its plans for much of its history. The slow and steady approach is embedded within the company's DNA. That hasn't completely changed, but more information has come out in recent years, such as the disclosure of Blue Moon. As Tim Fernholz writes in his book Rocket Billionaires, quote, Blue Moon was Blue Origin's first truly outlandish space business pitch. As the name implies, the company's proposed sending a lander back to the lunar surface, which could make it the first private company to touch down on an astronomical body. End quote. Blue Moon consists of a cargo lander, which will be able to transport several metric tons of payload to the moon, plus the NASA Human Landing System, which is being developed by Blue Origin in conjunction with a few other companies under the National Team banner. This is a part of NASA's Artemis program for the return of humans to the moon. Beyond that, Blue Origin plans on using its New Shepard launch vehicle for taking both payloads and travelers into space, a similar concept to the trips offered by Virgin Galactic, but launching from a reusable rocket which separates from the capsule carrying paying customers, who get to experience an 11-minute flight before landing back on Earth with parachutes. Blue Origin's revenues will come from space travel, defense launches for the Air Force and Space Force, partnerships with ULA and NASA missions. There's also been talks of planned private space stations in the future. As far as putting a valuation onto all of that, I haven't found a good one yet. I would venture a guess that it would currently be less than SpaceX, but who knows how things will play out. The company's New Glenn rocket was recently chosen by NASA for, quote, a NASA Launch Services 2 indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract to launch planetary, Earth observation, exploration, and scientific satellites for the agency aboard New Glenn, Blue Origin's orbital reusable launch vehicle. The contract allows Blue Origin to compete for missions through launch service task orders issued by NASA, end quote. With missions to the moon and Mars, space stations, travel potential, small satellites, and mining operations, it's clear that we are in the very early stages of business development in space. What it becomes and what each of these companies ultimately do to generate revenues is still somewhat opaque. It's exciting and interesting to talk about, though personally, I don't think that the future is going to look like some utopian vision, more like a further stranglehold of corporate and government power projected from the heavens. So basically a copy and paste of the current year into the void of space. Lots of money to be made, sure. Cool tech, probably. Beyond that, meh. What about you? How do you think about the business and future potential space exploration development? Let me know in the comments.